Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With another special WWE edition of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back somewhat unexpectedly here Wednesday morning to break down everything that happened coming out of an immensely newsworthy and entertaining television special, NXT New Year's Evil. Not only that, we will be taking a brief second look coming out of the debut of WWE Raw on Netflix. And yes, this shook up the entire schedule for this week and next week. More on that in a moment. Off the top, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. We need about 150 more subscribers so we can start monetizing the channel, joining the YouTube partner program. We just had our most watched video ever posted this week. So again, subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast and Blue Sky at Getting Over for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can send in questions and comments for the show. We will do our best to read them on the air, and you can vote for Getting Over. There are only a couple of days left in the 2024 Sports Podcast Awards. You can vote for us as Wrestling Podcast of the Year. We badly need your votes. It is almost over. We won in 2023. We want to go back-to-back in 2024 as Wrestling Podcast of the Year. You can do it by checking the pinned messages on Getting Overcast on Twitter and Getting Over on Blue Sky. You can also visit sportspodcastgroup.com and vote for Getting Over under Best Wrestling Podcast. We would greatly appreciate that. Lastly, do not forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
Sure hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts every week. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. As mentioned, our schedule underwent a big change this week simply due to the quality and newsworthiness of NXT New Year's Evil. I'm not sure why coming in, I did not expect it to be worthy of doing a show like this, but they completely over-delivered, particularly with the appearance of Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. So this is what's going to happen here on Getting Over. This is Wednesday when we are taping this show. We are delivering a special New Year's Evil edition of Getting Over that has pushed the 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka the Meaties, until Thursday. So Thursday, January 9th, you will get the Meaties. You may say, Silver King, what is happening to the AEW coverage this week? Well, we are actually going to be pushing that out 1 week, and there's a couple reasons why. Not only do I want to make sure I completely watch AEW and have the time to analyze it properly for all of you, AEW was heavily involved in New Japan Pro Wrestling 2 shows at the start of the year, Wrestle Kingdom and Wrestle Dynasty. Among the matches that we want to discuss and review are the return of Kenny Omega against Gabe Kidd, which everyone is saying is already the match of 2025, the early match of 2025. But it would be ridiculous for me to talk about 4 hours of AEW television and then not discuss what happened in New Japan. So we do this only a couple times a year, usually during WrestleMania week. We're going to do it again now, but with all the bonus content that we've been providing for you, along with how busy my schedule has been with work, we are going to do a double AEW episode next week. So on Thursday next week, I think it's January 16th, we're going to talk NXT, and we will talk 8 hours of AEW television along with everything that happened in New Japan to start 2025. A bonus loaded show for you. It cleans up this week, allows us to do this special episode, and still ensures that we give you full coverage of AEW with the Silver King having time to watch everything that happened in Japan as well. So just to reiterate, 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka The Meaties, coming out on Thursday. Next Tuesday will be your normal WWE episode. We're back to doing one per week. Then Thursday, NXT, and 2 weeks worth of AEW along with New Japan. Let's not forget, though, there are 2 WWE instant analysis episodes already waiting for your earholes. We did one Friday night after the first 3-hour SmackDown. We did another one Monday night after the debut of Raw on Netflix. Not only that, the 2024 Year in Review episode was published on New Year's Day, January 1st. If you have not listened to that, it is also in the podcast feed. So Getting Over still delivering the 8 episodes in 12 days that we promised, just a slight tweak to our schedule. Let's not waste any further time. Let's get right into everything we want to discuss on today's show, starting with some WWE notes coming out of the Raw debut on Netflix. Many of you, and I won't single you out just since so many mentioned it, you stated that you have the Netflix 4K tier and maybe even some other tiers in the United States, and you did not receive commercials on your broadcast at all. I'm also on the 4K tier, but technically I have a legitimate secondary account through a friend, and I did have commercials, as did many others, I presume with regular 4K accounts and other ad-supported tiers. So it looks like Netflix may have done some A and B testing, or perhaps you just got lucky once, or perhaps some of you are going to get lucky every time. Definitely something worth following that we won't know until next week and going forward. But for me, both live broadcast and replay, I had commercials, though I could fast forward through them. Whenever I wanted, you could also start from the beginning. So all of those concerns we had about functionality did not exist here. The one issue I have with Netflix is when you fast forward, it doesn't show the high speed like scrub. So you can't see like when the commercial ends and the show starts and then you know when to stop it. So you kind of have to guesstimate. That is frustrating. But let us know if your experience differs from anything that I've discussed, of course. But at the same time, we're not going to talk about Netflix every single episode of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. I did rewatch parts of the Raw on Netflix debut. I noticed something we probably overlooked when it came to The Rock's opening segment and how it transpired. Despite the hug with Cody Rhodes and the broing it up that we saw between them on social media, Rock said in his opening statement that we've spilled blood all over the United States and I'm willing to do it again. But at this time, I want to acknowledge you for carrying the company on your back. And I feel like that was glossed over both by us and everyone criticizing the segment. He also said about Tribal Combat that he would be watching the match very closely. Doesn't necessarily change anything that we laid out on our instant analysis, but I did find it curious that he seemed to almost acknowledge, hey, this segment, it's breaking kayfabe. But that doesn't mean this shit is necessarily over. As we stated on that instant analysis, this really was a show for casuals. It was a media event for celebrities and executives to a significant degree. The biggest mistake WWE probably made was overloading it with relevant matches and feud enders. You cannot have WrestleMania quality matches from a booking standpoint on a show not made for your regular audience. You cannot end feuds the caliber of these on a show with commercial breaks as opposed to a premium live event. Putting Tribal Combat on there was fine. First hour, commercial free, The Rock at the beginning and at the end of it. But CM Punk and Seth Rollins was clearly rushed to a degree, left meat on the bone, and Rhea Ripley, Liv Morgan deserved a TV main event at a minimum with 20 minutes, not a mid-show 12-minute match. Those were the greatest errors, along with not progressing any actual storylines to hook an audience for this coming week's Raw. If they had taken a more normal approach to the show, let's say 90 minutes of corporate shit and Tribal Combat and John Cena's return, but then 90 minutes of regular Raw, building and developing storylines and content, that show would have been so much better received. Longtime listener Austin Herzog wrote in that WWE should have done a kickoff show. He is 100% right on that. In fact, some of the press event bullshit that took the first 30 minutes of Raw could have actually been done at 7:30. You say, hey, we're going to start Raw at 7:30 with a big pre-show. The Rock's going to be on it. You take care of all of that in the first 30 minutes, and then you give a 3-hour, mostly regular Raw. It would have made everything that followed it better if they just started earlier or if they did a 1-hour kickoff. The black canvas for Raw is indeed better than the SmackDown blue by a mile, notwithstanding the ads, of course. Really, the only ads that are eyesores are Snickers Real American Beer and the Saudi tourism placement. The Fortnite Cricket and Netflix ads, they're just white, and they blend in really well. I would love to see those other ads lose some of their color, just making it far more palatable as a viewer. The referee shirts, in thinking back to it, they should be all black with 2 white stripes as opposed to gray with 2 black stripes. I mocked it up myself on Photoshop, just messing around. It looks way better. Instead, they really do look like McDonald's workers. I also believe the red ring ropes would play better, just given how much of the ring and barricade is black and white. But with the colored ads in the ring, perhaps they thought it might be too much color. I'd still like to see it at least once for an entire show. I believe it might end up working better. I figured I was going to fast forward the Hulk Hogan segment on rewatch. I actually left it on. It was really cathartic. What a dumbass move by WWE. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. We spoke about it at length on Monday night's show. But man, the way that has been covered, and given that is the big headline coming out of Raw, I mean, WWE has to be kicking itself in the ass. Like, this was foreseeable. It was such an own goal. What a mistake. I'm upgrading Tribal Combat to 3.25 stars and a B. Better action than I remembered watching live. It was chaos trying to build the show while watching and analyzing the match and counting commercials. It was a difficult night for me on Monday. I do wish there was more between Reigns and Sikoa after all the interference. I say that every single time there's interference in a major match. You do interference in like 2 minutes and then the finish. If you want to do interference, it's okay. But then give me 5, 6, 7 minutes on the back end. That way it's still the person beating the other person. But the point of this was really to rebuild Roman to a degree because he's taken multiple losses of late. He kicked out of some big stuff. Sikoa did as well. It was really entertaining. It just wasn't excellent wrestling. CM Punk and Seth Rollins was, as I described, slower than expected with too much finisher spam. It was more brutal and hard-hitting than I remembered at the start. So I was wrong to say that it didn't live up to what Seth said going in. I definitely believe it was produced in a way that left meat on the bone for rematches down the line, perhaps not even immediately, but they will absolutely need to get there in storyline. Not a huge surprise given it was the debut episode with millions of viewers watching inside of 24 hours, but Raw pushed Squid Game 2 out of the top spot of Netflix's top 10 in the United States and Canada and some other locations as well. That show is a global phenomenon. It was averaging 11.5 million viewers per day. So Raw being the number one spot still as I tape this has to speak to immense domestic and global viewership. By the way, I just finished season 2 of Squid Game myself over the weekend. No spoilers, obviously. Super disappointing that it was only half a season. That was utter bullshit. Interesting take about The Rock to wrap this up, and we're going to move into NXT. Did they do those segments with Rock on Monday and then Tuesday to ensure that fans did not continuously create rumors about him being at WrestleMania? We discussed how easy it will be for WWE to get back into a Cody or Roman feud, especially Roman at any time, really, despite what happened Monday night. Maybe this was purposeful, yet heavy-handed, as a way to say, hey, don't expect anything this year. Others went wild criticizing Rock on Raw, suggesting he completely threw away 2 potential feuds that could never possibly get built back up again. They read way, way too much into a board member breaking kayfabe in a promo in front of business folk and celebrities. We just weren't fans of it. We explained why on Monday's Raw on Netflix debut instant analysis. But I'm glad that we took a more measured approach, especially after Tuesday night. A report came out over the last week, and I actually, unfortunately, cannot source it because I didn't have time. I just put this note in my list of content that I wanted to cover on today's show, and I just forgot, so I apologize, and we'll circle back and give proper credit. But there was a report that with NXT Level Up getting canceled, that NXT Evolve will end up replacing it for WWE. This is something that we discussed, a year ago at this point. Not that we had news of it happening, but that we thought it should happen. And when they came up with NXT Level Up instead, it was like, this just doesn't make sense. Why are you kind of half-assing a concept when you have so much talent in the Performance Center? You can do an entire additional show. Now, as we did report, and as we stated on the show previously, the reason NXT Level Up was canceled and pulled was actually not for this NXT Evolve show that could happen, but rather the WWE LFG show, Legends and Future Greats, that they are taping to air on A&E. So that involves a lot of known athletes, both sons and daughters of famous athletes and other big names from college that are being mentored by WWE superstars, I guess technically managers and executives as well. And it's going to be a special show that they're putting on A&E going forward. That is what directly replaced NXT Level Up. If NXT Evolve does happen, it's just going to be an additional show that will really go back to what NXT originally used to be, pure developmental, with storylines and matches, using a couple veterans, but mostly fresh talent to get them TV time and get them ready for NXT. If Evolve does come into play, then what that also accomplishes, it pushes NXT a little bit closer to being a true third brand, and it makes the CW's deal for it even better than it was before. So when you couple that news item of NXT Evolve with The Rock showing up and what he said on Tuesday night, which we're going to discuss in a moment, it creates a really interesting dynamic for NXT and developmental within WWE. So we'll use that to kind of transition over to talking about NXT, a couple key items before we get into the full breakdown of the show. WWE announced on Tuesday that NXT Vengeance Day will be held at the Entertainment and Sport, Center. Again, I don't have the note in front of me, in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, February 15th. Anyone who follows us on Twitter at Getting Overcast and Blue Sky at Getting Over, you know that we reported this in December. So again, on top of something, just wanted to do a little Barry Horowitz and shout us out. Another reason why you should subscribe to us on buymeacoffee.com/getting over. I happen to love the number 5. I hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. Moving off of the self-promotion. We had been wondering what would happen to Corey Graves amid the commentary shift across Raw and SmackDown. Now, he landed on NXT Tuesday in a 3-man booth alongside Vic Joseph and Booker T. But it was unclear whether this was a one-off or a permanent move. Should he be there full-time? And we are asking and trying to find out details about what is happening with Graves. It would be an immensely interesting move. He has deep NXT roots, both as a performer and on commentary, and yet Vic and Booker gel incredibly well together and certainly do not need a third voice. It stands to wonder whether this is part of Graves' duties. Perhaps he will continue to call premium live events alongside Michael Cole. Maybe he will do a 3-man booth weekly on SmackDown with Joe Tessitore and Wade Barrett. And maybe he joins NXT for special events and premium live events as well. So he's like a multi-tool utility player. But unlike Mike Rome, who lives in Orlando, Corey lives in Pittsburgh. So NXT is not an opportunity to be home with Carmella and the baby, for example. Vic and Booker, they're perfect as a 1-2 punch. Graves was not out of place at all Tuesday, but he just wasn't needed. Again, maybe it's only for special events. I have no doubt Graves will continue to be the Pat McAfee replacement during football season, but I do wonder whether he feels marginalized at all and whether he's satisfied with his new role. Let's see what it ends up becoming. NXT on Tuesday in Los Angeles, it felt like a massive deal with a landscape Titantron, just the layout of the entire venue. The entrances really came to life, particularly for the women's title match and for The Rock. Energy was super high off the jump, and they carried that through the entire 2-hour show. Unlike SmackDown and Raw, NXT retained the light blue mat, which is interesting because NXT was the brand that initiated the black canvas in WWE. It also continued to use the white ropes. Like Raw, and presumably like SmackDown this Friday, the gray referee tops also filtered down to this brand. NXT is the lone brand, actually, where gray makes sense because it's the show's color scheme. It looked far better on Tuesday night with a light mat than it did Monday on Raw with the black mat. What I'm realizing now is that WWE is trying to toe a line between traditional referee attire, and UFC referee shirts. They're all black, sometimes with a logo in them. I'm almost positive that is where this concept has come from. I believe it's well-intentioned. I also believe it needs to be adjusted. Paul Levesque, Nick Khan, and Joe Tessitore were all ringside in the crowd during the show. Tess was the more unexpected of the three, so it was particularly great to see him. And we, of course, love everything Tess is doing with WWE. And I'll say it publicly here on the show. Maybe it'll put a little bit of pressure on. But we've requested to interview Tess a couple times now, and certainly hope that winds up happening. Of course, familiar with him from regular sports, boxing, college football historically. But now that he's ventured into pro wrestling and we've spent a lot of time talking about Tess on this show, hopefully he gets a chance to join the Getting Over Wrestling podcast at some point in 2025. That's it. Let's go ahead and talk about NXT New Year's Evil. And we will start where the show started, the NXT Women's Championship. Roxanne Perez defending against Giulia. This opened the show, which obviously pissed me off from the jump because this had main event written all over it, a far higher ceiling than the men's match. But this wound up being a strategic move, which we will discuss in a little bit. Extremely hot start with counters, tons of Giulia offense, a Roxy tope suicida. Giulia took her off the top with a double underhook superplex, followed by a clasped power driver. Perez basement drop kicked her through the ropes, only to take her Northern Lights bomb ringside. Cora Jade ran down, saving Roxy from a 10 count before Giulia kicked out of Pop Rocks in a false finish. The referee ejected Jade during a Roxy Fujiwara armbar. Giulia came back with a Arrivederci and the Northern Lights bomb for the 1-2-3 to win the women's title. This went just over 11 minutes, should have at least been 15 or 16. It was a loaded show. There were 5 matches and the Rock segment. They could have taken off one of the matches, given this 5, given another match an additional 5, given the Rock even an additional couple of minutes. But this was exceptional, as expected. It fell short of legitimate match of the year consideration, but if it had been given that extra time with a couple more false finishes and higher drama, it absolutely could have gotten there. From that standpoint, it's slightly disappointed knowing the ceiling was so much higher for these two. But given both of them are young and they're fresh in WWE, there are years, hell, there might be a decade for them to go even beyond this. It was outstanding for a TV match in all phases. The right winner at the right time in the right situation. The Los Angeles crowd was on fire to boot. My only real qualm is I just wish Giulia was using the Glorious Driver as her finisher instead of the Northern Lights bomb. It's basically the same move, but a seated version, which looks better and is more impactful overall. I'm not sure I understand what they're doing with her finishers. Nevertheless, 4 stars A-, right on par with CM Punk and Seth Rollins as the WWE match of the year to date, 8 days into 2025. Shout out to Roxy, by the way. She has been the best NXT Women's Champion of at least the last 5 years. This ended one of the best women's title reigns ever in NXT. Not the best. Obviously, that's Asuka. One of the best. Top 3, top 4, most likely. I've said before that she needs to remain in NXT at least until Stand and Deliver, but ideally through late 2025 or early 2026. There are still improvements she can make on character and promos. I would like to see her work in a tag team with Cora Jade, maybe even win those titles. But she has such a ridiculously high ceiling in WWE that it is crazy. And she proves it every single time she goes out there with anyone who can match or exceed her skill, which in this case, Giulia did. By the way, all 3 main women's champions in WWE lost their titles in a span of 4 days. Nia Jax, Liv Morgan, Roxanne Perez. Meanwhile, one of the 3 men's titles was even defended. I guess that's actually a sign of progress because WWE felt like the women's title changes were enough of a big deal where they could carry all of those shows. At the same time, I do wish that the women's titles were held in the same level of importance where they would say, we don't want to do all these title changes just on TV. We want to save them for premium live events. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I think you could argue in both directions. It is absolutely wild, by the way, that WWE has transitioned from the 4 horsemen plus Asuka to what seems to be almost a new version with Rhea Ripley, Tiffany Stratton, Bianca Belair, and Io Sky. Those are the 4 that the women's division needs to be built around at this point on the main roster. And then in NXT, they have Giulia, Stephanie Vaquer, Roxanne Perez, Jada Parker, and any number of other women, be it Zarya, Solruka, possibly Jordan Grace, whenever she fits in later this month. This is an insane women's division right now, especially when you remember 3 of the 4 horsewomen are still around and prominently being used, 2 of them awaiting returns that are imminent. Let's move over to the men. NXT Men's Championship. Trick Williams defending against Oba Femi and Eddie Thorpe in a triple threat. Backstage early in the show, Thorpe was shown being tended to by officials after having been attacked. Ava assumed it was bullshit, given what Thorpe pulled last time. He insisted it was real. Boy who cried wolf and all that. Ava later insisted it was bullshit again, only for Femi to interrupt her, admitting to the attack as payback. She refused to change or delay the match. I feel like there should be some type of kayfabe penalty for something like this. Like, he has to win by a 4 count, or he gets a 2-minute sit out 10 minutes into the match, or maybe he just gets fined a monetary amount. That's bad GMing by Ava, and it's one of 2 times in which she was a horrible kayfabe GM on this show. Now, this did not main event due to The Rock being in attendance. So already it allows me to take back my earlier comment. The women, as the opening match, were arguably in a more prominent position, at least equally as prominent as the men. This started one-on-one without Thorpe, who was shown backstage dragging himself to the ring, and therefore it was,
Oh, we got 2 big meaty men bumping me tonight.
Trick hit an avalanche bookend early. Williams was so much better working with a big man here, hitting a couple more major moves, including a flapjack. Trick countered fall from grace with a DDT, adding a roundhouse kick. Oba took him down with a European uppercut counter to a trick shot, then hit fall from grace, only for Thorpe to pull the referee out of the ring. Femi murked Thorpe with a huge spinebuster toss slam, 2 running uppercuts, only to get caught blind with trick shot for a false finish. Oba dodged a trick shot with Williams running into a steel chair that was held by Thorpe. Femi immediately hit another fall from grace and got the 1-2-3, with Oba shockingly winning the NXT Men's Championship in 11 minutes. Femi and Giulia both got pyro and steam in front of the Titantron to, I guess, not end the show, but nearly end the show. And just like with the women's match, this needed more time. I don't know that it needed as long as the women ideally would have gotten, 17 minutes, let's say, but this should have been a 15-minute match. If you're doing a title change and you're going to get that convoluted in the finish with Thorpe running in, I'm not saying it was a bad finish. I enjoyed the match in totality. I just felt like it should have been more for such a momentous development on NXT. And this was an absolute stunning piece of booking. I figured Thorpe was there to take the fall one way or another, but instead, he just cost Williams the title. We've been speaking for months about how Trick is nowhere near ready for the main roster. Charisma alone is not enough, given how far away he is from being ready in the ring. And given the finish, it seems like WWE does not have plans to bring him up imminently, which is a massive positive. At a minimum, Femi needs to beat Williams clean one-on-one before he leaves. That could come at Stand and Deliver, certainly, but I truly hope Trick is around through 2025 into early 2026. Just like I said about Roxy. Totally different reasons, though. What's strange is that the Trick Oba one-on-one portion of this match was Williams at his best. Probably his most exciting and smoothest one-on-one-ish match since Ilya Dragunov. In fact, that's not even a question. As I've said before, when he wrestles a larger man and delivers impactful moves, he is so much more believable. Trickshot remains an absolute shit finisher for a guy with his size and athleticism. Just look at it compared apples to apples with Fall from Grace. And I know Femi's bigger, don't get it twisted, but Trick is a large individual. He was a Division I Power 4 college football wide receiver. Okay, he's a big body dude, and he has more athleticism at his size than most other dudes his size. You need to take advantage of that. Doing a jumping knee is not taking advantage of that. So when he finally got a chance here to work with a guy like Femi, he was so much better for it. This was really well done and unexpected, with NXT changing both major titles on a TV special when Vengeance Day is only 5 weeks away. But holy shit, does this amp up interest in NXT even further. And these 2 matches, plus the rest of the show, you're going to hear me say it probably 3 or 4 times, it put NXT leagues above the 3-hour SmackDown and the debut of Raw on Netflix, which is crazy to consider being factual, yet it is factual. As for a match grade here, 3.25 stars and a B, but it was way more entertaining than the actual wrestling of it all. Javon Evans cut a through-the-wire promo, speaking through gritted teeth with his jaw wired shut. He promised to make Ethan Page feel his pain. Unique doing an angle that way. His jaw actually looked legit wired shut, so maybe something happened for real. Ava later criticized Page for the attack. He retorted that it's made major headlines for the brand, and he wasn't even booked on the show. That's when The Rock stepped in, going face-to-face with Ethan Page. They shook hands with Rock, seeming to respect his moxie for being an asshole, taking out his competition and not being shy about it. Rock said Page could call him if he needed anything, but he put over Ava as the final boss of NXT, saying they can't be cool if Page isn't cool with Ava. Rock then smacked him on the ass, which was hysterical. Then he asked Ava for advice speaking to the NXT universe, which is obviously hysterical for a different reason, given, The Rock has spoken to tens of thousands of people hundreds of times in his entire life. This was actually clunkier than you would expect for a segment involving Rock and Page, who are both great speakers. But what was super clear here is that Ethan Page was nervous, understandably so, and Rock lost himself a little bit. This was like giving prom date meeting girlfriend's dad. What I appreciated was that Rock was not acting like a babyface such as he did Monday night. He basically acknowledged that Page was an asshole heel, and he respected the fact that he wasn't shy or regretful about it. Rock also said, quote, "I'll see you on the main roster," which was significant rub for a guy in NXT, even if he's a veteran. On the other hand, if Rock had completely torn Page apart like he used to, like back in the day, that probably would have been more memorable and entertaining, all things considered. Page has publicly said previously that Rock was his favorite wrestler growing up, and he cut a really cool social media promo after the show, so this was a special moment for him personally. This guy went from doing nothing in AEW to being NXT champion and then being featured alongside the biggest box office star in the entire world in WWE. That is absolutely wild for a 6-month change. So The Rock main evented NXT. There was indeed mana. Rock again had legitimate chills to the point that it took him a long time to even get started. And he cursed, which got bleeped. The crowd was obviously hot as hell for him. This was major rock star playing a small private venue feel. He did not come out with the People's Championship, by the way, but he was holding it backstage earlier. I forgot to mention that. Rock reminded of the Cody Crybabies from 2024 and chided the fans for now being angry that he's being nice to Cody, which was pretty smart. Rock said he thinks 20 steps ahead, so fans should know their role, shut their mouths, and enjoy the ride. Then he flipped from Final Boss to Dwayne Johnson. Rock noticed there were 2 minutes left and said, "Fuck all that." Got a huge pop. He said he planned to visit NXT in LA a couple weeks ago, and he thanked the NXT fans because Raw in the Intuit Dome was a sexy ticket, the event you need to see, but NXT in the Shrine was the event you want to go to. Another huge pop. Rock told the fans that they were critical to NXT's success, developing talent, reacting to them for better or worse, and he dropped his catchphrase perfectly as the show went off the air. In retrospect, having Rock in the main event was perfectly sensible. In fact, he actually needed another 5 minutes allotted to his time. Here are 2 indisputable facts. The Rock was better on NXT than he was on Raw, and New Year's Evil was better than either the Raw debut on Netflix or the first 3-hour SmackDown. In fact, the way NXT was formatted is what should have been done for Raw, perhaps even with one fewer match, given the John Cena segment. I know NXT is not for everyone, but I cannot imagine being a regular fan, not a casual, watching all 3 of those shows and thinking NXT was not the best. If you disagree, that's fair. It's just how I see it. The Rock was fantastic here. I absolutely loved that he did not gloss over the Cody stuff. Even by saying he's 20 steps ahead, it told us all we need to know. Sure, the Cody story might be over, but none of this was done without him thinking it through. Or at least, just like 12 months ago, they're pivoting again, which would be hysterical. It's amazing how Rock can take shit from Hollywood or about business projects, have businesses fail, literally anything. But when wrestling fans get on his case, it actually affects him emotionally. Probably because it's the one fan base that has given him unconditional love and adoration for decades. Maybe he feels like if I lose them, It's a ticking time bomb for everything else. Or maybe I'm totally reading into it. But this was such a great way to address Raw without going too far in the other direction. Then, the way The Rock came out and put over NXT was tremendous. Talk about selling a brand and getting fans riled up to care about something. This hit like one of those old Triple H promos to start an NXT takeover. And the LA crowd was rabid for him. A classic black and gold NXT crowd. I badly needed an uncensored version of this Rock segment because brother was cursing up a storm and kept getting bleeped. Wound up finding it, by the way, on the CW YouTube, full uncensored, so you can go listen to it. I was going to cut some clips. I ran out of time, but a couple of them will be on the soundboard going forward. It does hit even better with the profanity. Again, a shame this did not get 5 extra minutes because the segment was magical and it would have only been better if he did not have a hard out. Credit to him for nailing it, by the way. I know some CW stations cut into news early. I got a bunch of tweets about people missing the end. Again, it is on the CW YouTube. You can watch it in its totality. These are the frustrations of being on network television. I legitimately wonder whether NXT might cross 1 million viewers with Rock involved. There was not much competition this night other than TGL Golf, college basketball. But yeah, everything about this segment and this show hit. Cannot sing its praises loudly enough. NXT is a must-watch for those who do not. As for those who criticized this and suggested Rock didn't plan what he was going to say and uttered a bunch of nothing, you gotta be high or something. That was the gimmick of the promo. They literally teased it backstage. The entire point was, I'm here because I love NXT. I don't have anything planned, but this is where the next WWE superstars and WrestleMania main eventers are being born. And therefore, you should be watching it every week because I love it. That was the point of the entire segment. It was the only thing that needed to be said. It was really not that hard to understand. Now, there's still more show to discuss from NXT New Year's Evil. But all in all, just to reiterate, for me, this blew away both the 3-hour SmackDown and the debut of Raw on Netflix. Different stratosphere in terms of entertainment. The show was loaded with quality matches that mostly got time. Storylines developed. The title changes felt monumental rather than predictable, especially because one of them was legitimately surprising. And NXT came across like a must-watch show for even regular WWE fans. As we just said, even The Rock was better on NXT, apples to apples. That was the exact type of promo he should have cut on Monday. Wading into Final Boss for a bit for the regular fans, coming back out as Dwayne Johnson for the corporate types and celebrities. Best of both worlds. Put over the product and its future rather than just the executives and shit. We've spent enough time talking about that perspective, but it's why this NXT hit so well and why we are even doing this show. Ultimately, the way New Year's Evil was built was immensely smart. NXT put its best foot forward for viewers who were only tuning in for The Rock with the women's title match. They dedicated the entire first hour to the women. Then they had Rock show up during the opening, at the mid-show, and in the main event to keep viewers hooked the entire time. And the men's title match was exciting and newsworthy enough where it still delivered as the co-main event, with Rock closing the show on a high note. If Rock had opened the show, given his propensity for going long, match time would have been cut and some viewers would have tuned out. It was legitimately the perfect spot for him at the end, and it was an almost perfect episode of wrestling television. It's going to be immensely difficult to top by any brand, main roster, WWE, AEW, whatever, in 2025. Just excellent. So now let's get to everything else that happened on New Year's Evil. Stephanie Vaquer, Cora Jade, Kalani Jordan, Lola Vice, North American Championship #1 contendership. Vaquer did her thigh driller early. Jordan cartwheeled out of a hurricanrana, then did her catapult tornillo outside. Stephanie did a sick dragon screw on Lani in the ropes, and her head bounced off the top rope for good measure, which was really cool. Vaquer did a double flying crossbody ringside with Lani, adding a Charlotte Flair moonsault in that it missed everybody. Cora murked Lola with a pump knee, only to eat an Olympic slam from Lani, who landed flat on her stomach for a 450. Vaquer took advantage with the SVB, I believe it was called, package backbreaker for the win. I presume that stands for Stephanie Vaquer Backbreaker. What a shitty ass name. If so, it is not RKO. You can't just do that with any finisher. You got to do better on finisher names, NXT. If it is SVB and that's what it stands for, I mean, step your effing game up. What are we even doing here? Luckily, that did not sully a fantastic four-way in which every lady got to shine. This immediately followed the women's title match, and it was an exceptional 1-2 punch. Cora continues to look improved, knocking off the rust. Lola is so much smoother than she was like even 6 months ago. Lonnie, still a bit start and stop due to her high-risk nature, but it's getting better. And Vicaire is obviously Vicaire. Total ring general, 3.5 stars and a B. I might even be underselling it. I'm going to watch it again. Shotzi, Gigi Dolan, and Tatum Paxley fought Fatal Influence. Crazy that Tatum was even able to wrestle this match. She suffered a ruptured ovarian cyst just a couple weeks ago. The pose for the face trio on the ropes before the bell was super unique. They have such great presence together that I really hope they develop into a full group with a name, a theme, all of that. Super dangerous move early with Shotzi almost breaking Fallon Henley's neck. She also missed another tope suicida, but this one was purposeful and it was safer. Gigi and Tatum hit a high-risk move ringside, each of them did, with Shotzi adding a flying senton on Henley for the win. My thought after the bell, real surprising they had Shotzi pin the champion when they just established a number one contender in the same hour of the show. That would kind of give away the fact that Vicaire is not going to win the title, at least you would think, because Shotzi should absolutely be a top contender after that. Otherwise, what was the point of Fallon taking the fall? Why wouldn't you use either of the other two in that situation? Solid match overall, absolute chaos from bell to bell, and just straight up entertaining. By the way, as mentioned, the first hour of NXT being all women completely delivered to the brand's strength. These three women's matches went back to back to back. Hour 2 was also great. Hour 1 really flexed that the women lead NXT, and I love how Shawn Michaels is not shy about that. So this situation with Vicaire and Shotzi was addressed later backstage as Henley and Vicaire went face-to-face with Ava between them. Shotzi approached, saying she deserves a title shot, now just the same because she pinned Fallon clean. Henley tried to get them to fight to determine her true number one contender, and Ava's like, okay. Another bad GM decision by Ava. Stephanie literally won a fucking number one contendership within the hour on TV. And now she has to win another match to get a title shot? I mean, she's not even a heel. She's a straight up babyface. Both of them are. Why should Fallon, a heel, get her way and avoid a triple threat? Or why should they not be contenders in order? Vicaire first, Shotzi next. This was just dumb booking. Shotzi wanting a title shot was logical. Ava acquiescing to Fallon was ridiculous. I'm going to presume they draw and it becomes a triple threat anyway. That would protect Vicaire from taking a loss as Henley retains her title. Her reign just should not be ending yet. OTM cut a tape promo saying they were out the mud in the tag team division and gunning for the titles. They said wrestling twice in one night is nothing to dealing with real life struggles like they have throughout their lives coming out the hood. Best promo they've ever done together since forming as a team. No doubt about that. Curious to see how they work with Fraxium. I believe that title match is happening next week. Ava backstage informed Unholy Union they can fight the Metagirls next week for a women's tag team title number one contendership. We kind of knew that last week. And lastly, we had a Heritage Cup match, Charlie Dempsey defending against Lexis King. This was sudden death with one fall to the finish, so basically a regular match. King was hot out of the gate, hitting a bunch of crossbodies. Dempsey rolled through one into a submission, only for King to power out with a slam. Dempsey countered the coronation into a crossface chicken wing. Shout out Bob Backlund. Lexis nailed Charlie in the crotch with a headbutt, just as he didn't jump high enough on a leapfrog. This was a planned move so that King could follow with the coronation for a cup win that was clean, yet seemingly cheap due to an inadvertent crown low blow. Another super inventive finish to an NXT match. The continued interesting telling of this story. I wonder if they might take the cup away from him again next week and run this back a third time. Entertaining throughout with a much better crowd response than I would have respected on the road for these guys. Was it the worst match of the show? Yes. Was it still good enough? Absolutely. And that wraps up NXT New Year's Evil. You know, I went ahead and gave the Raw debut on Netflix a B-. If I was grading this just straight up as a TV show, it gets a flat A. That's how much I enjoyed it. Yeah, I wish they would have delayed this Heritage Cup match and given 5 additional minutes to both the women's and men's NXT championships. Like, that really would have been the move. They didn't do it. I don't get to decide what WWE and NXT and AEW and every other company puts on television. I can only tell you what I would do if I had the pencil and could make decisions like that. I really felt both of those matches deserved the time, especially the women, especially Roxy dropping her title after like 277 days. So yeah, that was NXT New Year's Evil, a fantastic show, top to bottom, super, super entertaining. And I got to be candid with all of you. Silver King's exhausted, right? Eyes bigger than stomach when it came to scheduling out all these shows. That said, we are going to wrap all of this up Thursday with the episode you have been waiting for. The 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka the Meaties. Don't forget, we have 2 WWE Instant Analysis episodes waiting for you. First, from the 3-hour SmackDown on Friday and the Raw debut on Netflix Monday. Also, in this point last week, we had the 2024 Year in Review episode. All of those waiting for your ear holes. Also, super important is that you vote for Getting Over as Wrestling Podcast of the Year for 2024. You can do that in 2 different ways. First, by going to sportspodcastgroup.com, clicking Best Wrestling Podcast, and then, of course, choosing Getting Over. You can do that as many times as you want. You can also check out our social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. The link to the direct wrestling ballot is pinned to the top of both profiles. Click on it, vote, again, as many times as you want. We would greatly appreciate that. On Twitter and on Blue Sky, at Getting Overcast and at Getting Over, respectively. You can get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show. We will do our best to include them. And I have a feeling next week we'll have a ton of listener comments and questions. That is just the way that this has been trending. Don't forget, we will be back next week with a WWE show on Tuesday covering SmackDown and Raw, our first 6-hour WWE show. That should be pretty interesting. And then next Thursday, we'll have your NXT, AEW, and special New Japan show all in one. On the way out, please remember that the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast
is all about the five.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it live right here on the show. And please remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
$5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all for being listeners here, Getting Overheads for the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast. Still plenty of content to deliver for you. The Meaties coming up and a ton more still over January through the remainder of 2025. This is the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.